Death the leveler. The glories of our blood and state are shadows, not substantial things. There is no armor against fate. Death lays his icy hand on kings. Scepter and crown must tumble down, and in the dust be equal made with the poor crooked scythe and spade. Some man with swords may reap the field and plant fresh laurels where they kill, but their strong nerves at last must yield. They tame but one another still. Early or late, they stoop to fate and must give up their murmuring breath when they, pale captives, creep to death. The garlands wither on your brow, then boast no more your mighty deeds. Upon death's purple altar now, see where the victor victim bleeds. Your heads must come to the cold tomb. Only the actions of the just smell sweet and blossom in their dust. Hello everyone, welcome back. And I'm back to discuss a lesson with you after a very long gap. It seems ages since I did my last video with you on the lesson Macbeth. Perhaps you have guessed by now that I'm going to discuss with you a poem. The title of the poem is Death the Leveler by James Shirley. James Shirley was an English poet. He was born in London in 1596 and died in 1666. In addition to writing poetry, he also wrote a large number of plays, which made him very famous. In fact, he wrote 36 plays, and his plays were witty and satirical. Since I have already read out the poem, I'm not going to do it again. It will be sheer waste of time. What I'm going to do is I'll be explaining each line to you. First, let's turn our attention to the title of the poem, Death the Leveler. What does it mean? Well, the word leveler means an equalizer. Why does the poet call death an equalizer or a leveler? Well, look at human society. If you study human society carefully, you will see that there is a great deal of inequality in human society. There is a great deal of inequality and discrimination. On the one hand, we have the super rich, the mega rich, the billionaires like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. On the other hand, we have extremely poor people who cannot afford 2 square meals a day. They go to bed hungry. They live below the poverty line. On the one hand, we have very powerful people, wealthy people, like the prime ministers and presidents. On the other hand, we have the dispossessed, the marginalized. Now, this inequality in society is very, very stark. But what happens when death strikes? Well, death doesn't respect wealth, it doesn't respect title or social status. Death reduces everyone to dust, whether you are a king, a queen, or you are a beggar or a pauper. When death comes, you will end up in the grave and you'll be reduced to dust. In this way, death brings everyone to the same level and eliminates inequality. That's why death has been termed an equalizer or leveler. I hope this point is clear to you. Now, when we talk about death, what is the image that crops up in your mind? What is the emotion that you experience when someone talks about death in front of you? Are you scared of death? Does it send shivers down your spine? Well, frankly speaking, majority of the people are frightened of death. This is because we don't know what lies beyond death. Death is veiled in mystery. In this poem, the poet James Shirley, he deals with the theme of invincibility of death. Death, according to him, is invincible. What does the word invincible mean? It means unconquerable, unbeatable. Well, nothing or no one can conquer death. Nobody, no matter how rich or powerful they are, they cannot subdue death or subjugate death or triumph over death. Death is inevitable, inescapable, and unavoidable. So death is invincible. And secondly, he expresses the view that death is an equalizer. I have just explained to you how death is an equalizer. Now, let's get into the point without any further ado. Well, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to explain each line to you, so please pay attention. In the opening two lines, the poet says that the glories of our blood and state are shadows, not substantial things. Now, here, the word glory means fame or recognition. Blood means our parentage, who our parents are, or the family in which we have been born. And state means social status. Now, the word shadow is important here. Shadow is something that you cannot hold on to. It doesn't last long. It vanishes and disappears very quickly. So the poet tells us that the fame and recognition associated with our birth and status are like shadows that disappear very quickly. It is not something significant. Let me give an example. I think you know that Shah Rukh's youngest son is named Abram. Now, Abram is always in the spotlight. He's always in the glare of media spotlight. Just because he is the son of Shah Rukh, who is the Badshah of Bollywood, he is famous. Similarly, let's take another example, the example of Taimur. I'm sure you know that Taimur is the star kid of Kareena Kapoor and then Saif Ali Khan. He is famous just because his parents happen to be celebrities, Bollywood celebrities. So there is a lot of pride and then fame and recognition associated with our birth and status. But according to the poet, they cannot protect us from death. The next line is, there is no armor against fate. Fate means destiny. What is our final destiny? The ultimate destiny of man is death. The word armor means protection or shield. There is nothing that can shield us from our ultimate destiny, which is death. In the next line, death lays his icy hands on kings. Look here, death has been personified. Do you know what personification is? Personification is a literary device where human qualities are given to something which is not human. Death obviously is not human, but here death has been described as having a hand, and so death has been personified. Icy hand. Icy means cold. So the line means that death claims the life of kings. Even kings are not spared by death. Scepter and crown must tumble down. What does the word scepter mean? Scepter means a decorated stick carried by a king or a queen, and which symbolizes their royal authority and power. Crown, as you know, it is the headgear worn by kings and queens. So here, scepter and crown represent the idea of royalty. Okay? Must tumble down. To tumble down means to fall down. Here, it figuratively means that you die. So, kings and queens, monarchs, emperors and empresses, they cannot escape death. Their ultimate destiny is death. Even though they are immensely rich and powerful, they cannot escape death. And in the dust be equal made with the poor crooked scythe and spade. When a king dies, he ends up in the grave. And once he ends up in the grave, his body is reduced to dust. Now look at the last line of the first stanza, with the poor crooked scythe and spade. What does the word crooked mean? Crooked is something which is bent, not straight. Scythe means a sickle, and you know that a sickle has a curved blade, so it is not straight but crooked. Here, the words scythe and spade represent working class people, peasants, farmers, ordinary people. Now look at the word poor. These ordinary people are poor, unlike kings and queens. But then in death, what happens? Everyone is reduced to dust, whether you are a king or a beggar, whether you belong to the royal family or you belong to the working class. I hope you have understood the meaning of the first stanza. Now let's move on to the second stanza. Some man with swords may reap the field. Here, some man with swords refers to warriors or military generals. Think of great military generals or warriors in human history. Alexander the Great, or Julius Caesar, or for that matter, Adolf Hitler. They became famous by winning battles and wars and you know what happens in a battle or in war. Tens of thousands of people are killed. Here, rip the field means to commit massacres, to kill people in large numbers. So these warriors, these military generals, they kill tens of thousands of people and plant fresh laurels where they kill. Planting fresh laurels means they gain fame and recognition when they kill. They become famous by committing massacres. But these mighty military generals, can they escape death? But their strong nerves at last must yield. They may be physically strong. They may have a very, very powerful army. But in the end, they must yield. Here, the word yield means to surrender. Surrender to whom? Finally, they surrender to death. They succumb to death. They tame but one another still. The word tame means to subdue, to subjugate, to bring somebody under your power and control. These mighty warriors and military generals, they defeat each other in battlefield, and they emerge victorious by defeating their enemy. Early or late, they stoop to fate. Stoop means to bend down. Fate, I've already explained it to you. Fate means destiny. Our ultimate destiny is death. So stoop to fate means bending down or bowing before death. Now look at the word, look at the expression early or late. We don't know when death will come. It is uncertain. Someone may die early, someone may die in ripe old age. But die we must. Sooner or later, we all succumb to death and must give up their murmuring breath. When you give up your murmuring breath, you die, you expire. Breath is something which is very, very vital to life. When you stop breathing, you are dead. These mighty generals, in the long run, finally, they die, even though they are very, very powerful when they are alive. When they pale captives creep to death. See, these mighty generals and warriors who have committed massacres and killed tens of thousands of people, finally they become captives. Captives means prisoners, prisoners of death. Though they are victors in battlefield, they become prisoners of death. And finally they creep to death. The word creep means to move slowly, to crawl. Do you understand that every moment you are getting closer to your grave? That means we're inching towards our grave. These mighty generals who have killed tens of thousands of people, they are also inching towards their death. For them, death is inevitable, inescapable. Their military might cannot protect them from death. Now let's move on to the third and final stanza. The garlands wither on your brow. You know, the word garland here symbolizes our achievements or the honor that we receive in life. When are we garlanded? When we have achieved something spectacular in life. But according to the poet, these worldly achievements, they wither. Wither means they fade away. So we run after worldly achievements, but no matter how spectacular our achievements are, they finally slip away from us. They are snatched away from us by death. Then boast no more your mighty deeds. So the poet is expressing the opinion that it is futile, it is useless to boast about worldly achievements. Mighty deeds means our worldly achievements. Whatever we have achieved in our life, these are our mighty deeds. And we are usually very, very proud of our achievements, our accomplishments. But according to the poet, it is futile, it is useless to be proud of these achievements because they are fleeting, they are transient. They are not going to stay with us forever. Death will snatch them away from us. The next line is, then boast no more your mighty deeds. I've already explained this line. The next line is, upon death's purple altar now, see where the victim bleeds. Death's purple altar. Altar, you know, it is a flat-faced surface where a sacrifice is made. So, who are the victims? The same person who is a victor becomes a victim. How is it so? Victor here refers to a military general who has won a victory in the battlefield. But the same person becomes a victim of death. The victor has to sacrifice himself at the altar of death because he cannot escape death. The next line, your heads must come to the cold tomb. So, what is the final destiny? No matter what you are, whether you are powerful, rich, the ultimate destiny is that you must come to the cold tomb. That means you will end up in the grave. And once you come to the grave, you will be reduced to the dust and you'll be made equal with the rest of the people. Now the last two lines of the poem are very, very significant. So please pay attention. Only the actions of the just smell sweet and blossom in the dust. What is these actions of the just? Actions of the just refers to noble action. What do you mean by the word noble action? Noble action means something which you do for the sake of others. You know, when you do something for yourself, it is a selfish act. But when you do something which is going to benefit your fellow beings, it is a noble action. For instance, if you build a hospital or you build a school, then it is a noble action. And any action which is fair, just, ethical, and then morally tenable is a noble action. Smell sweet and blossom in the dust. It means only our noble actions will survive our death. We will be remembered by the noble actions that you have done during your lifetime. Look at this expression, blossom in the dust. To blossom means to flower, to flourish. When we die, our bodies are reduced to dust. But then, when we do noble actions, they blossom. They don't die. They survive our death. And will be remembered by posterity, by future generations, because of the noble actions that we have done. This brings us to the end of the poem. I'm sure you have understood what the poem is about. Now what I'm going to do is I will sum up the poem for you In the first stanza, we learned that the fame and recognition connected with our birth and status are like shadows. They are insignificant because they cannot protect us from death. No matter how rich and powerful we are, death will claim us in the end. Whether a person is a king or a peasant, they will not be spared by death. Death doesn't respect whether a person is very, very rich and powerful or whether someone is very poor and ordinary. Death treats everyone equally. Now, in the second stanza, we learn that the warriors, the military generals who are strong and powerful, they also cannot escape death. They also become victims of death in the long run. And in the third stanza, the poet tells us that it is no use bragging about our worldly achievements because these worldly achievements will be snatched away from us from death. The person who is a winner in the battlefield finally becomes a victim of death. And this person has been referred to as victor-victim. And finally, the poet expresses the view that if anything survives our death, it is our noble action. We will be remembered for the noble deeds that we have done for the rest of humanity. I hope this explanation will prove useful to you. Now, in one of the slides, I have already shown you the rhyme scheme of the poem, but let me just briefly touch upon it. If you study the first stanza, you will see that the first line and the third line, they rhyme together. So they are represented as A and A. And the second line and the fourth line, they rhyme together. So they are represented as B and B. So A, B, A, B. Now, the fifth and sixth line, they again rhyme together. So they are represented as C and C. And the last two lines of the first stanza, that is seventh and eighth line, they rhyme together. So they are represented as D and D. So the rhyme scheme of the poem is AB, AB, CC, DD. The other two stanzas also follow the same pattern. Now let me discuss a little bit about the literary devices or the figures of speech used in this poem. One is figure of speech which I have already discussed with you. Death in the poem has been personified because death has been given human qualities. Next we have metaphor. Okay, now what is the metaphor? A metaphor is a comparison between two unlike things. Let me give you an example. Anger is fire. Anger and fire, these are two different things, but they share some common attributes. Anger and fire both can burn and both can be dangerous. Another example can be love is the fine wine. This is also an example of a metaphor. Another device, literary device, which has been used in the poem is metonymy. Now, what is the metonymy? It is a figure of speech that uses the name of a thing which is replaced with the name of another thing. For instance, let me give you an example to make the meaning clear to you. The pen is mightier than the sword. Here the pen refers to a writer or the written word. Sword refers to military strength, might, or a warrior. Similarly, in the poem, scepter and crown, they have been used to represent royalty, kings and queens. So this is an example of metonymy. And I forgot to give you the example of metaphor from the poem. Well, the very first line, the glories of our blood and state are shadows. Here, the glories of our blood and state have been compared to shadows, and this is an example of a metaphor. This brings us to the end of this poem. I'm sure this explanation will benefit you hugely, but please read the text and then listen to this explanation. If you have any queries, if you have any doubts, you can always contact me, get in touch with me. If you have liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. That's all for today. Take care of yourself. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye for now.